Morning. Let's start it. I have the second half of the lesson. The first last week was forgiveness and the importance of forgiveness of the heart, and this one is on conflict management or handling conflict. And if trying to decide, why does this have to be an issue? Why do we have to deal with conflict all the time? And particularly in the church, and dawned on me that if you're in any type of leadership, whether it's in the home or your church or your community or your work, every situation is going to have some conflict. And so it was really easy to drop the scenarios because we just, I know how this is. Let's try this one. And so we're going to wrestle with pages 43 through 47 in the book. But before we start, I'd like to open with a word of prayer. Father, thank you that you love us and that we are your children and that we have the privilege in a free country to come worship you and study your word and not worry about outside oppression and that you gave us your word. I pray that you'll help us to, each one of us, to get a piece of your wisdom today to understand how to help us through the ubiquitous situation of conflict. In Jesus' name, amen. There's a verse, Romans 12:18.
Did the video start?
I did turn it on.
Sweet, just check.
There you go. I aimed it at you, but I didn't turn it on. Right. Romans 12:18 says, if possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. There's lots to that verse, but that's going to be the basis for where we start. Conflict is inevitable, like I just said. Now I want you to imagine, like we talked about last week, 3 churches. The first church is that there's conflict all over in church, right? Whether the pastor leader level to the nursery level to the just in between people level. So in a church, there's 3 different churches. Which one do you want to be a part of? The first one is that there's no resolution of the conflict, no forgiveness, and no reconciliation. And that seems like a pretty icky church to me. The second one is there's partial resolution where there's forgiveness. We talked about last week about forgiveness of the heart, but they don't really reconcile the relationship. So they all kind of walk around happy but not engaged because they're not really reconciled. And lastly, there's the opportunity for a full conflict resolution where there's forgiveness on the parts as well as reconciliation on the parts. And obviously, we're aiming for the third, number C. So how? And I hope you remember from last week that forgiveness of the heart is the first step. If you remember, if you look in your book, you will see that there's 4 levels to forgiveness. The first is pain, and the second is understanding God's forgiveness for you. The third is forgiveness of your heart toward the other person. The last one is reconciliation or go to the other person. But I put here because I hope that you remember nothing else from this whole series. When you're into the process of forgiveness, you have to recognize that forgiveness is a decision that you have to make, that I'm going to choose to forgive them. And it is a process that you have to go through. Sometimes the process is a moment or an hour, and sometimes it can be years. And it's okay to have both. I mean, it's okay to recognize that sometimes you need a while to go through the process of forgiveness. But in page 43, there's a toolbox that we're going to go through today called Handling Conflict. And I just basically, it's on what I'm talking about now is on page 43 and 44. I'm sorry, 44 and 45. And Blake has labeled it the pathway to peace. When we sent this book out to be reviewed by people, actually, to my amazement, this is what they liked. A lot of them liked this diagram or this process the best. And so we're just going to go through it. And the first step in that, if you're in conflict with someone, is to confirm to yourself, not to the other person, to yourself, that pleasing God with your life is the most important goal in your life. That's where we got to start. That pleasing God is the most important goal in life. The second is to reflect on your part of the conflict. We all skip that. I'm going to look back as I was preparing this, thinking of conflict that I was in. I was pretty quick to skip over phase 2, but the point is you have to own 100% of your 10% or whatever percentage of the conflict. If it's 2% or 50% or 10%, you have to own 100% of your conflict, and that takes time, argues against rushing into making reconciliation before you go through these steps. Third is repent to God of your sinful attitude and actions. Meaning, you need to repent to the other person also. 4 is go to the other person. We're going to spend time with go. and 4 and 5 are kind of hooked up together. Love and extend your forgiveness to the other person. You have to have forgiveness of the heart on your, you have to have forgiven that person before you go to them. But they may ask for forgiveness, and then you give them your forgiveness. But the forgiveness of the heart has to happen before they ask for it. If it doesn't, this is going to be a mess. Does anybody have any questions on that? Disagreements? It's kind of a review of last week, but the steps and the sequence are important. And if you're going to be a leader of any sort, whether a leader in the home or a leader in your, civic, or whether you're in the mom's soccer group or the church or the school or wherever you're going to be a leader, you're going to have to know how to handle conflict, because conflict is all over all the time. You need to know how to do it. It's bread and butter for a future leader of the church, is to understand how to handle conflict. All right, so the discussion question at your tables is, how does one go or not go to achieve reconciliation? We just went through those 5 steps, and number 4 was go. There's a right and a wrong way to go to someone. For example, if I'm in conflict with Mark Johnson, for example, I go to Mark and say, I'm just letting you know that I forgave you. And he has no clue. How's that work, right? Yeah. That's just really not the way to do that. On the other hand, if I go to Mark because we're in conflict and say, I'm sorry for my part, can we talk about this? That's probably a healthy way to do it, right? And so at your tables, come up with some ways to not go that you've heard someone else did. Not that any one of you would have done that, but that you heard someone else say how to not go, and ways to go that have been helpful to you. All right? That's your mixer for about 5 minutes. Off you go. Mark and Connie, you're going to need to be at a table.
Oh, okay. Well, I have a 12-year-old son, and, we both, when there's conflict in the house, and I admit, I can, obviously parents, we do things wrong, we say the wrong things, we raise our voices. And so the things that I've learned not to do with any of my kids, but is to go and apologize and then use the word but. Because then you basically throw out everything you apologize for, because they don't see that you're sorry.
Absolutely.
They just see that you're blaming me more for what I did wrong.
Very insightful.
Yeah.
Any others? When people have come to you to make it right, but they launch on you, what do you, any others?
Yeah, I'll let you deal with that.
I have a very least favorite that I'll tell you, but I'm waiting to see what you guys can. John, I'm curious, when you were pastor, what percentage of your pastorate time was spent in conflict resolution, one way, shape, or another? 5, 10, 20?
50.
50? Okay. That's why it's important to know how to do this.
Especially when we're building buildings and people are arguing about the color of the carpet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in case you don't know, they're going to paint, what's it called, narthex or whatever? Foyer. They're going to paint the foyer in January. We're taking bets as to who's going to argue the most as to what color. We're also drawing lotteries among the staff as to who has to claim responsibility for deciding what color. Because I would not want to be that person, right? To your point of the smallest of things people get upset about. But give me another good example of how not to do it. I'm sorry, but is a really good one. Any others?
One of the things that came up at our table that I think is an important thought is that if there's a conflict, discern within yourself that the conflict is just something that's going on in your mind, and it's between you and God. And if you really do need to go to the other person, in yourself you're conflicted, but going to them unnecessarily and stirring it up to something it never was in the beginning, you should have discernment about what's going on within you, and pray about it before you go to the person to be sure.
I agree. You stole one of my punchlines. If you turn to the bottom of page 2, there's some scenarios we're going to discuss, and I'm going to just want to hit it on the head. These are scenarios you're going to discuss, but for now, let's just look at number 1. A friend makes a snarky comment in a group setting about your inability to navigate some technology.
You said you weren't going to talk about me.
no one laughs and the conversation moves on. So how do you manage that conflict? That's not really conflict. I can overlook that. And you grow up, right? I mean, and to your point of that, discern whether that's really a conflict that I need to make a deal with over the person that, or is that something that I can forgive and move on? John?
You're really talking about there of having a conflict within ourselves.
Yeah.
Between what God really wants us to do and what we really want to do in a human level.
Yeah.
So it's still conflict, but you get to discern, is it in me just, or is it between me and actually somebody else?
Yeah. The point I put that as a scenario is not all conflict has to be between people or has to be fatted out or make a mountain into a molehill. If someone makes a snarky comment about my technology, I can overlook that. I can, as you say, talk to God about it and decide that there's a verse how honorable it is to overlook an offense for a person to overlook the offense. And I can do that. Not all the time, but so the point of having that, your point in having that question in there is you need to discern when this is something you overlook or is this something that truly is a conflict that's harmful to the church. All right, what else did you come up with not going? John?
And under your comment, you can never really overlook a conflict. If it's happening inside of you, you better deal with it with God.
Yeah. I had a situation several months ago when I was in a room with multiple people. Blake was in the meeting and someone said something that would have been very easy for me to take offense at, really very easily. And Blake called me and the next day and said, "You okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." And Blake said, to his wisdom, he said, "I'm going to call you in a week and ask if you're still okay. And if it's still churning in your mind, you need to go make it right with this person. If not, no big deal." And I just thought that was really a wise pastoral approach to how to deal with it. I thought Blake really looked wise there, as he often does. You just, under that squirrely kind of demeanor, is a really pretty, kind of a really wise, loving, caring man. You know? Ouch. But he doesn't wear a suit and tie and stand up in front. Blake's really wonderful. But sometimes you don't see it because he's just so nice. And that was, I thought, an example of being really wise. You know, I'm gonna call you in a week and say, have you dealt with the conflict with, you're exactly right, John. All right. My least favorite, I'm going to tell you, is, and there must be something about me, nothing good, but there must be something that people come to me and say, "I have a problem with you," not quite, but they say, let's talk about this conflict, right? And I get it, that's probably all me. But the one I like the least, and you can actually even talk about it at your table if you want, is, "I've been praying really, really hard about this, and I'm going to come to you and confront you." And they're not, what they're passive aggressively saying is, "I'm right, so you should listen to me." That's what they're not. I believe that we should pray, right? I believe that we should pray all about that. But when you lead a difficult conversation with, "I've been talking to God and God thinks I'm right, so I'm going to confront you with it," that's really not an okay way to do that, isn't that? Isn't that the epitome of passive aggressive? So I'm sure that some of you are going to have to come to me in the future. Don't lead with that. All right? I think that's really, that kidding aside, I think that's passive aggressive. When you say, I've been praying about this and I think I need to confront you. Just say something other than that, because when you lead with, "I've been praying, I've got God on my side, so you better listen to me." Right? You see that any other way? Melody?
Another version of that is the Holy Spirit told me to talk to you.
Same thing.
Yep,
Same thing. So those are skills perhaps we should pick up. Okay, how do you do it then? That's how you don't do it. Thanks for listening to my pet peeve. How do you do it? So you're all going to come up here and go, "Hey, Scott, I've been praying about this." How do you really do it? What's the way to do it? We talk in these Sunday school lessons about these book principles of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let's talk about how to do 5. By the way, I don't mean that you shouldn't pray. In fact, you should pray a lot. Just don't lead with that to kind of say, I said it once. All right, what are some ways to do it? Good ways to do it.
Forget who said it here, but basically just making it clear that you have a desire for reconciliation.
Yeah, very insightful. In case you couldn't hear, you said making it clear that your point or your purpose to the conversation is reconciliation. Right from the get-go. Put that out there right from the get-go. It's not finding fault, finding blame, it's let's reconcile. It's very insightful. John Worksam.
We also talked about forgiving, that you come from a position that you've already worked through your own forgiveness. So you've done what we talked about last week. So
Thank you for
coming-
picking up on that, yes.
Yeah.
That its sequence is important, and it
Yes.
starts with understanding you're forgiven and moves on to the process of forgiving that person, then you can go to it. If you go out of order, nothing good happens. Anything else? Good ways to do it? Josh?
Expecting that you probably don't view the 10% the same way, that you're gonna walk in and what you think is your own 10% to own may be a larger portion for the other person.
Insightful. So you'd lead with, I probably see this wrong, or I'm not sure I see it the same you do, but let's just talk about that. That's very disarming when you own your part. The first part of your conversation is owning your part of the problem. That's very disarming, and that makes it down. I mean, that de-escalates the heat in the room, and that's a very good way to do it, Josh. Very good.
Do you still think that we do the part that we own pro rata? Like, I have 10%, I'm gonna own it fully, but clearly you have 90%, so that's a bigger problem. I mean,
I probably wouldn't tell that.
no, but I'm just saying that I think that's difficult, because I'll own 10%, but hey, I only had 10%.
I think you could say I own I am really sorry for my part of it. And
Yeah.
it's really a very disarming way to do that,
Yeah.
Josh.
But I hear what you're saying, because that's another form of passive aggressiveness.
Yeah,
I'm gonna confess my minuscule part.
Right.
And we're
for
gonna
your
wait
big,
for
we're
the
gonna deal with your
thing
big
to-
part.
Thank you, Kathy, that's so right. That's so right, that's passive aggressive. Yep.
I think entering the conversation humbly is important, and it kind of, pertains to what Todd was just saying, is like, be willing to understand that they might have things that they have been, spewing about in their hearts and minds.
About you,
Conflict.
or about me, yeah,
So
they
be
may
ready
be
to
stewing
hear it
about me.
out.
Yep,
So one other thing in our lead and follow group, we went through the Sunday school material from last week and.
no. You wanna talk to me later, it's okay, talk to me later.
But I think we landed at the end, after many other good discussions, with the verses in the Sermon on the Mount about, because this whole perspective of last week and even this week is that we're the offended one. But forgiveness and conflict resolution, we're often on the other side. And the verses are, if you are presenting your gift at the altar, and then remember that your brother has something against you, go to your brother. So that's a go.
Mhm.
And that's an opener.
Mhm.
I can sense the tension between us. I feel like things aren't right between us. And,
It's extraordinarily disarming.
and.
Yep. Yep. And isn't it sweet when, after that, the relationship is even better than it was before? Isn't that just amazing sweetness? I think it is.
But it may or may not be sweeter.
It may not, but it may.
But
And
yeah,
it's
it
worth the
has-
risk.
Yes, it is worth the risk. Those who want the reference, it's Matthew 5:23 through 26.
All right. Any more good ideas on that one? I think it's helpful. These sort of discussions, I think they're really helpful. I just learned a lot from what some of you guys said. I appreciate that. The role of other people, it's kind of split. I'm sorry, I got cut. I had a different size font at work. The role of other people is little. That's the summary of that. In interpersonal conflict, it is little. It's mostly in step 2. You might consider going to a good friend, a spouse, and say, this is how I see it. Do you see it? Do you see something I'm not seeing? But that is a really small circle. That's why on the next page it's capital letters. That should be 1 or 2 person. And Matthew 18, we've all seen that. All right, next in front of you is this diagram that's got the arrows. That for a technophobe is pretty good, I think. Please God, reflect on your part, repent of your part, and go. If you skip those steps, what happens is on the right-hand side. If your goal is to please God, you'll want to, instead, there's only one other person to please, and that's yourself. And you'll get angry about that, and that's the result of that. If you reflect on your part, but if you don't, if I don't realize that I have a part of it, I'll desire revenge. Because if I haven't fully owned my part, it must be all his fault, and he hasn't done anything, and I'll desire revenge. repenting of your part, both to God and to the other person. If you realize that you have guilt or wrongness and you don't open up to either God or the other person, you'll isolate yourself with guilt. There's a whole lot of people in that church, in our church like that. They're not in churches like that. And lastly, if you go to the other person and extend your love and your forgiveness that you've already got in your heart. Forgiveness doesn't happen only when they ask for it. Forgiveness starts with forgiveness in your heart. When people ask for forgiveness, that's not when forgiveness started. You're just extending the forgiveness that's in your heart to the other person. And if you don't do that, you'll want to punish the other person, which doesn't seem like a healthy way to go. Now the next thing, what if one of those steps is skipped or goes out of order, right? If you skip step 1, you'll self-destruct in anger, and bitterness. I think we can all see that. If you skip 2 and 3, if you skip 2 and 3 and just move on to 4 and 5, you'll go and the reconciliation will look like an accusation, right? If I don't look at my part, but I simply say, Mark, you blew it. Well, if I don't say I had an element, a role of that, now you've got an accusation. That's no way to do business. And if you skip step 4 or 5, the relationship remains broken for God and all the world to see. Bobby Heinen's famous quote, church that doesn't know how to forgive and reconcile looks like no difference to the world than the world. All right. So now the scenarios for discussion, and we have about 15 minutes. And let me read them and maybe get you a point of what I'm trying to get at. One we've already done. A friend makes a snarky comment in a group setting about your inability to navigate some technology. No one laughs and the conversation moves on. We don't have to go through steps 1 through 5, right? Just wrestle within yourself, forgive and move on. That's okay. Number 2, you have a fight with your spouse. You're upset because supper's not ready when you come home. And you say things that shouldn't be said. A conflict occurs. What is the path to peace for this couple? Number 3, your non-Christian coworker takes credit for your work, and as a result, they get promoted to the position you wanted, and now is your direct supervisor. Sorry about that mistake. Number 4, the Christian brother or sister makes a false accusation against you after an intense discussion with them, and now you're no longer on the worship team. Sorry, Victoria, but I just picked a. You have an intense discussion with someone, and they have the power, and they throw you off the worship team or the trustees or whatever team you want to be on. Or your sibling takes all the good things that you wanted after your last parent dies. Now, if you want a little extra credit, you can take in scenario 4, the Christian brother or sister who refuses to admit they're wrong. You've only got 15 minutes to solve all of these, so off you go on your table. Those who know me know that Blake is like family to me. I was not at all trying to discourage or just speak ill of him. He is family to me, and I was trying to show off his wisdom, not his happy-go-lucky tenor. All right. What'd you come up with for number 2? Do you have a fight with your spouse? Never happened at our house. I just watch the neighbors. You are upset because Magnuson, in case you all don't know. You're upset because supper's not ready when you come home and say things that shouldn't be said. A conflict. What's the pathway to peace for that couple? What'd you come up with? Not that it ever happens in any of your families or your marriages.
The husband just needs to apologize.
Fair enough. That's assuming that the wife made the meal. It could be the other way around, couldn't it? In a conflict like that, how many of you have ever experienced that timing is key?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Barb. Yes. That's the point is you just as soon as you blurt out what you shouldn't say, if you just say, oh, I'm sorry, and move on. Timing is key, right? How you do that is recognize your own oops or your spouse's oops and be sensitive to their needs as to when would be the most meaningful time to say something rather than, and that was the point of that one, is the timing is important in the sequence. It's too easy when you have a book schematic like what you have in your toolbox to just ping, 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 check the box, go down the line, and you're done. There has to be an element of consideration for timing. Number 3, your non-Christian coworker takes credit for your work, and as a result, they get promoted to a position you wanted and now is your direct supervisor. How would you handle that? that's someone in our church right now. This is their life. How would you handle that? Grind your teeth and move on?
One of the things I thought about is in God's sovereignty, He allowed this. So maybe, probably, in life's big picture, God's got a plan here. You just have to carry on in an honorably way and see what God does.
That's very insightful. The concept of God's sovereignty, you would use that in developing a heart of forgiveness, right? Isn't that where you would use that tool? Do you all see that regardless of what happened there, you need to develop a heart of forgiveness first and foremost? It's fair to look, keep going back to our steps in order, to say, what did I do that I didn't get that position? Maybe I could have done something better. Maybe I just got the bad end of that deal. But look at yourself before you get mad at the other person and work on the heart of forgiveness in yourself. Would any of you go to now your boss and say, I feel icky about this, however you want to have yours. Would any of you go, or would you all just stop at the step of the heart of forgiveness?
I think sometimes, because we don't know the other person's heart and why they would take credit for your work and why they did that. We don't know what's all going on inside of them. But sometimes when there are situations like this where you see that a person is doing something that is not helpful, I mean, it looks like it's helpful to them to just take credit for things and move up a ladder. But really, when all the people around him who know that he did what he did, he has lost their respect. And it's not really good for him to have that reputation. And so when you love a person, you're willing to do the hard thing to help that person. And so sometimes, I pray for, God, if I'm the person that you want to talk to the person about this sin in their life, this is sin in their life, that you would open a door of opportunity, that you would clearly show me, and it would be orchestrated by your hand, that we would have the opportunity to talk about it, and his heart would be ready to receive. And so that's a very delicate, hard thing to do. But in the end, it's the most loving thing.
That's brilliant. I think praying to see the door rather than to force your way through a closed door, that's brilliant. Depends upon an interpersonal, interactive relationship with Jesus, which is what we all strive to live for. Ben?
I think you have to take a step back because there's two things going on in this situation. One, the person sinned against you, took credit for your work, and then they got a promotion. From your perspective, like you're making the assumption that they got a promotion solely based off of them taking your work. That could just be 10% of why they got a promotion. They could have a lot of other good attributes that led to them getting a promotion. So I think before you go, because now they're your direct supervisor, so before you go and address the conflict, you have to make sure that what you're going to talk to them about is for what the problem is, not the promotion part is not really the problem. The problem is the taking credit of the work.
Very insightful. Yep, we don't know everything.
Can you repeat what he said?
I'm sorry?
Can you repeat what he said?
This assumes that the reason that he got the promotion is because he stole your work. There may be other reasons. And so if you go to him just with the you did wrong, this is the result, there may be 100 other reasons you don't know about. And so you have to have a humble spirit, I'm gonna put words in your mouth, a humble spirit to recognize that I don't know everything about this situation. So if you're going to approach the person, approach it from a humble perspective. And what that looks like is I may not know all the story. Did I say that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I saw Josh.
One of the things we talked about that might be disarming in that conversation, if you do have it, is like we talked about the desire for reconciliation being named in those conversations. Maybe making that person aware that you aren't seeking to tell anybody else or to undermine their position that they now have, that you just want to be able to trust your now boss and have a working relationship with them going forward. their default is probably to assume that you're trying to get their position revoked.
Sir?
Because the person's a non-Christian, is there any expectation that they're gonna have the same, I don't know how to put it, but it's like, you know, as a Christian, we're trying to, work towards God and be more Christ-like.
Yeah.
If that person doesn't have that expectation, they're not following that same path. Is there any expectation that, this isn't just something that I have to deal with?
Yeah.
Rather than, there might never be some kind of resolution or something like that, because that person's, not having that kind of an expectation. They might think that what they did was perfectly okay.
Yep. The other thing that I was struck when I was writing this question is that the other person might have guilt about it. And by you coming in and making sure the relationship is okay, you don't have to demand an apology, I'm overstating, but simply saying, I'm making sure our relationship is fine might be the brightest light you could shine for Jesus, or to a non-Christian, to your point. Nate?
That's actually what I was just gonna say. I was gonna say, if we handle this situation humbly, with prayer and, as a Christian should do, it could be an opportunity later on to demonstrate the good news of Christ to them.
Yeah.
Because they might not know of their sin.
Yep.
And this could be their first witness to,
Yeah.
wow, that was terrible of me.
What's different about this guy? Yeah.
Right.
All right,
I've got one.
I'm sorry.
As a Christian, we may want to be concerned about the company that has employed all of us, in this scenario. So, somebody in that company, presumably the person who promoted my quote-unquote enemy, may want to know this about the person, that the person who's just been promoted is dishonest, untrustworthy, take credit for somebody else's work. Depending on what kind of company that is, that trait in that person could show up later, maybe even result in a lawsuit.
Yep.
So out of my concern for the company that employs me, I might want to go to somebody higher up in the company and just tell them my side, not demanding that I get the promotion, not demanding anything, just saying, you may want to know this. If they choose to investigate it, fine. If they choose not to, fine. But at least I, out of concern for the company, gave some information that they may want.
That certainly possible. That sort of decision needs a whole lot of prayer to make sure that's what you're supposed to do. And Ben's perspective there may be things you don't know. And when you go to that company and say that, you have to go in such a humble spirit, because you have to recognize that you may not know the whole story. All right, I want to get on to number 4. A Christian brother or sister makes a false accusation against you after an intense discussion with them, and now you're no longer on the worship team or whatever ministry you wanted to be on. Yeah. How would you handle that? And you really want extra credit. What if you go to them and the person says, I was right. How do you handle that? You may not, or you may think this may never happen. Trust me, this happens on a regular basis. If you're trying to think, now who was Scott thinking about? Is any of 100 people?
So I'm going to try to summarize, and everybody at the table can jump in. But what we talked about was having a heart of forgiveness, reflecting on what was the intense discussion and what was said, and seeing what my part was, and being able to forgive, but also seek reconciliation for my part. Recognizing that it's not as important the outcome as far as being on the worship team as much as reconciliation with this person.
I want to stop. Do you all hear that?
Yeah.
That's really great. Keep going, I'm sorry.
Okay, and then the last part we talked about was how you may need to go to someone else. It may need a Matthew 18 response. If you've worked with them, talked to them, they won't accept your feedback, then you may need to bring someone else in the church, an elder or another leader who could go with you to work it out, because they may not be able to hear it from you.
Does everybody recognize that's an extremely hot or high temperature situation? And the higher the temperature, the more thoughtful, prayerful, wisdom you need to approach to a situation. And this is a really hot situation because it's between Christian brothers and sisters in the church, requiring all the more prayer, etc. Other thought, I'm sorry?
Which also brings to mind, we as a table recognize too that typically this doesn't happen, and what will happen, a more typical response is the person will leave, carry the bitterness and not reconcile or not work through it. So there's a lot of people carrying around bitterness for things like this.
Talk to me about timing. Or did anybody else have a way that they wanted to approach this? This is not check the box Christianity. This is walk with the Spirit and perceive His timing